All right, hello there, thrill seekers. I want to talk to you today about thinking the thought of non thinking. There's a conversation in an essay called Fukanza Zengi by Dogen, and Fukanza Zengi is usually translated as something like recommending Zazen to all people. People have different translations of it, but they're usually something along those lines. But Fukanza Zengi is what it's called, and it's Fukanza Zengi, not Fukanza Zenji. Whenever you see a G, the letter G in transliterated Japanese, in Japanese that's been written in Roman letters, it is always and forever pronounced G and never J. So it's Dogen and not Dogen, and it's Fukanza Zengi and not Fukanza Zenji. So that aside, there is that conversation, and I referenced this conversation in a video I put up last week called something like Zen in Japanese Culture, or something like that. Anyway, so you can watch that if you want. But the difference is between two expressions Dogen uses, which is fushiryo and hishiryo. So think the thought of not thinking is fushiryo, and we'll go into what that means. And it is different from thinking is hishiryo. That's what we're translating. So we're going to go into this in detail. Don't worry. Here we go. So I got a question on that video last week, or a comment that said something like this, or something exactly like this, because I copied it down. I don't believe Dogen said, think the thought of not thinking. There must be an error in translation, because as soon as one thinks, the intellectual mind starts to take place. Okay, so that's his complaint. He thinks it's an error in translation. Well, let's look at that first. So here's how I responded to the comment, and I'll just read you my response and we'll go into the details of what that means. Dogen wrote, Ko no fushiryo te o shiryo seyo. And I'll put that on the screen in case you nerds want to look at what kanji was used. Word by word, you would get something like this. Concretely, on the basis of non-contemplation, contemplate. I say emphatically. Japanese grammar is backwards from English grammar, so this is a jumble. This is what I wrote him. So in something more like standard English word order, we get, and this is my best effort at a really direct translation, no funny business. I say emphatically, concretely contemplate on the basis of non-contemplation. And I wrote to the commenter, it's a very difficult sentence even if you understand Japanese. It is a koan. And my further comment was, think the thought of non-thinking is a reasonable translation. And then we'll talk about other translations in a minute. The only quibble I have with that translation is that the English word think may be somewhat different in meaning from the Japanese word shiryo. Shiryo is composed of two characters which individually mean think, I don't know if they're going to be there on the screen, the first one, and the second one means measure or weigh. So it implies a state of active, deliberate thinking about something rather than the state wherein the mind is sort of wandering around. So it's closer in meaning to contemplate. So let's look at some of the various translations of that section of Fukanza Zengi. So we're going into really minute detail. You should probably read the whole of Fukanza Zengi if you want to really understand what he's talking about, but we're concentrating on this one little sentence. Here is the version from the printed version of Shobogenzo Volume 1. It appears as an appendix in Volume 1 of Shobogenzo, the Nishijima Cross version, in print. And here's what they said in print. Sitting immovably in the mountain still state, think about this concrete state beyond thinking. How can the state beyond thinking be thought about? It is different from thinking. This is just the pivot of Zazen. Now, in 2009, Nishijima Roshi was writing his blog, and he slightly revised that. So I'm going to read you his revised version in 2009. Probably without Mike Cross's involvement, because Mike Cross and he were not talking by 2009. They had a little bit of a falling out. Sit immovably in the mountain still state and think the concrete state of not thinking. How is it possible for us to think the concrete state of not thinking? It is just different from thinking. This is just the abbreviated technique of Zazen. Now, some other translations, I'll just run through them. This is Ed Brown and Kazuaki Tanahashi. They have, "Now sit steadfastly and think not thinking. How do you think not thinking? Beyond thinking. This is the essential art of Zazen." Thomas Cleary has, "Settle into sitting perfectly still. Think of what does not think. How do you think of what does not think? It is not thinking. This is the essential art of sitting Zen meditation." And Reiho Masunaga, his version is, "Think the unthinkable. How do you think the unthinkable? Think beyond thinking and unthinking. This is the important aspect of sitting." And now Yasuda Joshu Roshi and Anzen Hoshin Sensei, they give us, "Settle firmly and steadfastly. Think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Be before thinking. These are the basics of Zazen." That's a nice translation. I like that one. This is the official Soto Shu version. You know, the bureaucrats who sit there and tell us that they know everything about Dogen. They say, "Think not thinking. How do you think not thinking? Non-thinking. This in itself is the essential art of Zazen." Carl Bielefeld gives us, "Sitting fixedly, think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. This is the essential art of Zazen." Shohaku Okumura gives us this version. "Think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Beyond thinking." And in Okumura's translation, he also nicely gives us what's called the autograph version, Shinpitsu Bon. So Dogen wrote and rewrote Fukan Zazengi many times, beginning probably as early as 1227. The earliest version that still exists was written in 1233. The version that we consider the standard version, the one I've been quoting from up until now, is the version that he completed in 1244, about 10 years before he died, right? Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. Anyway, you can check my math. But so it's easy to figure out how old Dogen was when he wrote something if it's dated, because he was born in the year 1200. So the version he wrote when he was 33 years old, as opposed to the version he wrote when he was 44 years old, the earlier version says, "When thought arises, be aware of it. When you are aware of it, it will disappear. Put aside everything outside continuously and make yourself into one piece." One Piece. My nephew loves One Piece. Anyway, this is the essential art of Zazen. And I've got one more translation for you, so I might as well give it to you. Hakun Barnhard, who I don't know who that is, translates this section as, "Think the fundamental thought," which in scare quotes, "think the fundamental thought which is not thinking. How? When thought arises, do not get involved with it. Let the mind dwell in the depth beyond thought." So she gives us a very, her kind of interpretation of what it means, which is legit. That's sometimes what you got to do. Now, let's get even more sticky and in the weeds, because in Nishijima Cross's original version, or in the version they put in print, there's a little footnote. And the footnote goes, "These lines, the think the thought of not thinking is different from thinking, these lines come from a conversation between Master Yakusan Igen and a monk. They are discussed at length in chapter 27 of Shobogenzo, Zazenshin." Now, I already talked about how Fushiryo the fu is a kind of light negation of the word shiryo, and Hishiryo is a strong negation of the word shiryo. And shiryo, as I told you, is more akin or more like the English word contemplation than the English word thought. When I think of the English word thought, I just think about anything that happens to fly through my mind is a kind of thought. I don't know if everybody defines it that way, but that's how I define it. When I think of the word contemplation, I think of I'm actually doing some active thinking. It's not that I just suddenly get the image of a peach tree in my mind, I start going, well, why did I get an image of a peach tree in my mind? What do peaches represent? Peaches are pink. Peach is kind of a euphemism for butt in Japanese. It is, momo. So that would be shiryo, that would be contemplation, that would be my mind following a train of thought somewhere, rather than just the various images that pop into my head, or your head, or whoever's head. So what I think Dogen was getting at is more like contemplation, or deliberate thinking, than just thoughts bubbling around in your head. And I think this is borne out by what I'm about to read you now, so let me read it to you. This is Zazenshin. This is where he explains what he means by think the thought of non-thinking is, or think the thought of not thinking, it is different from thinking, or it is non-thinking, or it is beyond thought, or it is before thought, or however you want to translate it. I just read you a bunch of people's different translations of how they dealt with this word hishiryo. Okay, and here's how Dogen talks about it, and this is the Nishijima Cross translation. I didn't look up other translations, so we're just going to stick with Nishijima and Cross for now for this. Here's what he says, and it's a bit long, so I hope I don't bore you to death, but I do think this is important if you're really interested in this stuff. While Great Master Yakusan Kodo is sitting, a monk asks him, "What are you thinking in the still state?" The master says, "Thinking the concrete state of not thinking." The monk says, "How can the state of not thinking be thought?" The master says, "It is non-thinking." So here we get yet another translation of that little conversation. So here's Dogen's comment, and it goes on for about a full page and a half, so forgive me for being long-winded. Settle in, grab a drink, and whatever people say. Anyway, here we go. Experiencing the state in which the words of the great master are like this, we should learn in practice mountain still sitting, and we should receive the authentic transmission of mountain still sitting. This is the investigation of mountain still sitting which has been transmitted in Buddhism. So we're talking about sitting, we're talking about zazen. So that's an important part to remember, because all of this is what we're talking about, what we're doing during zazen, and not just some other sort of activity. Well, you could do it in other activities, but we're talking specifically here about zazen. Thinking in the still state is not of only one kind, but Yakusan's words are one example of it. So we can have lots of different ways to think during our zazen. Those words are thinking the concrete state of not thinking. They include thinking as skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, and not thinking as skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. And that is a reference to when Bodhidharma was talking about his 4 students. He said, one, you've got my skin. The second one, he said, you've got my flesh. The third one, he said, you've got my bones. The fourth one, he said, you've got my marrow. And a lot of people think that these are ideas of a deeper and deeper understanding. So skin is superficial, flesh is underneath it. I guess it means muscle in that case. Bones are underneath that, and marrow is the very center. But Dogen does a whole essay in which he says that you completely have the skin, you completely have the bones, you completely have the flesh, you completely have the marrow. I got the order wrong. But anyway, he doesn't make a distinction. Dogen doesn't make a distinction between those as being superior or inferior to each other. The monk says, "How can the state of not thinking be thought? Truly, although the state of not thinking is ancient, still it is, how can it be thought about?" And the footnote here says, "The state is unthinkable at each moment." In the still state, how could it be impossible for thinking to exist? How could it be impossible? Actually read that wrongly when I was working on this. I read it, how could it be possible for thinking? So how could it be impossible for thinking to exist? And why do people not understand the ascendancy of the still state? And ascendancy means being beyond. Sitting in stillness is ascendant to or beyond both thinking and non-thinking, is what Nishijima Roshi's footnote says here. If they were not the stupid people of vulgar recent times, they might possess the power and might possess the thinking to ask about the still state. So again, he keeps pointing you to the still state of Zazen, the sitting Zazen, sitting still. And kind of putting that before what you think about. The great master says it is non-thinking, so that's fushiryo. This use of non-thinking is brilliant. At the same time, whenever we think the state of not thinking, we are inevitably using non-thinking. In non-thinking, there is someone, and that someone is maintaining and relying upon me. Very interesting little line that you should probably stop the video and contemplate for the next 10 or 15 years. So, in non-thinking, there is someone, and that someone is maintaining and relying upon me. I think he really gets something important there. But let's move along. The still state, although it is I, is not only thinking. It is holding up the head of the still state. Even though the still state is the still state, how can the still state think the still state? So, the still state is beyond the intellectual capacity of Buddha, beyond the intellectual capacity of the Dharma, beyond the intellectual capacity of the state of realization, and beyond the intellectual capacity of understanding itself. So, the still state is beyond anything you can think about. The one-to-one transmission to Yakusan of the state like this is the 36th already in the line of direct descendants from Shakyamuni Buddha. He means he's the 36th descendant. And when we trace upward from Yakusan, there is, after 36 generations, the Buddha Shakyamuni. So we're going back, and that's Buddha Shakyamuni. So he's saying it directly comes from him through that line of succession. Having been authentically transmitted like this, thinking the concrete state of not thinking is present already. In recent years, however, stupid, unreliable people, Dogen minces no words, have said, in the effort of Zazen to attain peace of mind is everything. This is just the state of tranquility. This opinion is beneath even scholars of the small vehicle. It is inferior even to the vehicles of men and gods. How can we call such people students of the Buddha Dharma? This is what I mean when I say he doesn't mean thinking in the sense of you have to get rid of just any sort of random bubbles of consciousness or whatever you want to call it, or just things that pop into your mind. He's not talking about that. So, they're saying that he's denying this idea that you have to just be in this state of utter tranquility. He's saying that's not what we're aiming at. We're not aiming at a state of utter tranquility, a state of blank mind. There is another group of people who say sitting in Zazen to pursue the truth is an essential mechanism for beginners and late learners, but it is not necessarily the action of Buddhist patriarchs. For them, walking is also Zen, and sitting is also Zen. In talking and silence, movement and rest, the body is at ease. So Dogen's going to say, no, that ain't the case. So there are a lot of people who will say, cooking is my Zazen, or fishing is my Zazen, or playing guitar is my Zazen. And Geshin, who wrote the book, what is her book called? Anyway, whatever Geshin's book was called, she says, Zazen is my Zazen, which I think is a really nice way to put it. So Zazen is my Zazen. Do not associate Buddhist patriarchs exclusively with this effort of Zazen. That's the bad idea that he's going to denounce. And now here's Dogen's comment on that. Many who call themselves followers of Rinzai are of this opinion. They speak like this because they have been remiss in receiving the transmission of the true life of the Buddha Dharma. What is a beginner? Which sort is not a beginner? At what place do they locate a beginner? So we can't even call people beginners. Everybody's a beginner every moment of their lives. Remember, as the established method of investigation in learning the truth, we pursue the state of truth in Zazen. The point, in manifest form, is that there is acting Buddha which does not expect to become Buddha. Because acting Buddha is utterly beyond becoming Buddha, the universe is realized. The Buddha body is utterly beyond becoming Buddha, but when nets and cages are broken, sitting Buddha does not hinder becoming Buddha at all. At just this moment, the power is originally present, through 1,000 ages and 10,000 ages to enter the state of Buddha or to enter the state of demons. And forward steps and backward steps possess the capacity intimately to fill ditches and to fill valleys. So there he's getting all poetic on us, and I'm going to just leave aside an analysis of that. Here's what I do, okay? When I sit Zazen, lots of things bubble up into my head. You know, like I said, an image of a peach tree, and why am I thinking of peach trees, and various problems I'm having with people I know, or Ziggy doesn't like to go outside anymore. Anybody want to tell me about that? He got spooked by the fireworks around the 4th of July, and now he's to the point where even though the fireworks are gone, he doesn't want to go outside. So it's really difficult to get him to go for a walk. If anybody's a dog owner and has thoughts about this, I'd love to hear it. But these are the kind of thoughts that go on in my mind, okay? So thoughts like that. Why can't I get Ziggy to go outside? What am I going to do about getting Ziggy to go outside? Should I mention in my video today and see if anybody has an answer to it? These are things that are bubbling in my mind. When I realize that I've gone on a tangent again, like I do every... I probably go on 2 or 3 per minute. I'm not even exaggerating. I just go, okay, remember what I'm doing. I adjust my posture and I think the thought of non-thinking, which is to say, I realize that there's thinking going on, all this stuff about Ziggy and whatever it happens to be, but there's something else going on. That's the Hishiro to me. That's what I define it as. The non-thinking, the different from thinking, the beyond thinking, the before thinking, however you want to determine it, is that something which is happening that is not thought, but it is aware of thought. So I kind of try to point my attention back inward towards, okay, let me be aware of this thing that is aware of me being aware of thought, that is me. What is me? What am I? What is this thing that's looking at thought? What is that? That silent something that witnesses all of this without commenting on it, without getting affected by it, that's just there when everything is going on. There is something which is there all the time, which is going on, which knows about all of this. What is that? I am a manifestation of that, it seems to be. I am that, as Nisargadatta Maharaj said. But what is that? Well, I'm never going to get an answer, but I can start to look at that. So thinking the thought of non-thinking, as I said to the guy who made the comment, is essentially a koan. It's like if you're expecting it to be a concrete sort of thing like you'd get in a user's manual for your car that says, turn the gasket to the left and remove the doohickey and, whatever. It's not going to be, it's not that kind of instruction. It's much more nebulous, and it's telling you something that is, in a way, deliberately kind of murky. That's the way Zen does it, because in Zen we kind of believe that if you over-explain things, you're just over-explaining things, and you're not getting any closer to the truth. But, as Nishijima Roshi used to say, people like explanations. So sometimes you give people explanations. But ultimately the explanations are all kind of not the thing you're trying to explain. The same way the gasket, to say remove the gasket from the doohickey or whatever I said as an example from the instruction manual, even in a case like that, the actual doing of the thing is different from the words that trigger you into figuring out how to do the thing. So it's just like that. Just look at what's actually going on. The mountain still state, the state of Zazen, the still state, as he says. That's my brief explanation of that. And I want to mention something else before I go. For those of you in the UK or near the UK, some people have pointed out that I had the dates for the Hebden Bridge retreat slightly wrong. I said the 15th through the 17th. It's actually the 14th through the 17th, and I've corrected that now, so anybody who's worried about that. I believe, as far as I know, they allow people to do partial. So if you've already decided you're going to do 15 through 17, don't worry if you're going to miss the first day. Actually, the first day is not really a full day anyway. I think we start at 3 p.m. or something like that. So that's that. Also, that retreat is kind of lacking in people. So it could be because we decided to do it in August this year, and it's hard to get people to do things in August in the UK, as I understand. But come out and do it. It's worth doing, and it'll be a great retreat. It's always one of my favorites. The other retreats that you'll see at the end on my European tour, as far as I know, all of them are still open to people. The only one that you might have to strong arm your way into would be Benedictushof. But from my understanding, from talking to people who've attended that one, if you say the right things to the Benedictushof people, they will let you sign up late. So it's all open, and you're going to see the dates. I'll put them up right now. These are the dates. You're seeing them right now. And all are open, and so please sign up for those, and I will see you there next month. All right, if you want to donate to me, helping me travel and do all the things that I do, you can go to the URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. You will find my links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts there. Those are my main ways of making a living, so I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't have to support me if you don't want to. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye.
Hi, Ziggy. I asked my people on the internet how to get you to go outside, because you got to go outside and take a walk, man. You got to go outside and look for cats and things like that. You got to do it, man. You can't just stay inside all day, okay? All right. We'll see you later, Ziggy. Bye. You can go back to sleep now.